Hello everyone, and welcome to the first video in my ongoing Siege series, Beginner Basics. As the name suggests, this series will be best for new and upcoming players, who are looking for some guidance and shortcuts that can only come from months of experience playing Siege. By making this video series, I hope to speed up the time it takes for new players to grasp core concepts and basic gameplay, stuff that outside of guides can only really be learned through grinding multiplayer, which, I think everyone can admit, can sometimes be a painful learning experience. By sharing what I've learned in my time playing Siege, I hope that I can help new players acclimatize to the intense FPS action that Siege potentially offers. With that said, let's get underway with this first video in the series, which will be focusing on operator roles and playstyles. Given that operators in Siege are specifically tied to either the defensive or offensive teams, I will first cover one of the teams and then move on to the other halfway through each of these Beginner Basics videos. I would also take this opportunity to point out that the difference between an operator role and an operator playstyle is definitely there. So yeah, let's just start with the defenders, shall we? Now there are two main playstyles for the defending operators, which are largely dictated by their speed. The first, and typically faster playstyle, is the roamer. These are often your 3 or sometimes 2 speed operators that can move around the map and often choose to go off-site at the start of a round, and when necessary will circle closer to the objective later on. By staying off-site, they can buy a lot of valuable time for the defenders simply by staying alive, as the attackers often feel unsafe pushing a site if they know for a fact that there is still a likely roamer somewhere on the map still to deal with. Roamers can certainly get kills, and frankly often do get the bulk of the kills in a match due to their mobility, but that is not the only goal. A valuable secondary goal, instead, is to gather information as to where the attackers are coming from and pushing from. The second, and largely slower playstyle, is the anchor. These are typically your slower 1 and 2 speed operators, whose role sees someone stay on or very close to the objective site, and they use cameras often to help roamers with their roaming, direct them to the parts of the map that they need to go to potentially get kills, and if the attackers ever get close, the anchor can try to hold tight and sneaky angles and defend the objective directly. Staying alive as an anchor is even more important than staying alive as a roamer, as if the anchors on site get taken out early, it becomes very easy for the attackers to pile in onto the site, which then forces the roamers to come back and defend, countering their mobility advantage and ideal playstyle in situation. Now, these roaming and anchoring playstyles are playstyles in the sense that regardless of gadget, an operator who is really fast will be better at roaming by definition than a much slower and subsequently louder operator, as of course in Siege there is also a link between being slower and making more noise as you move, which clearly isn't ideal for quietly roaming about the map. These playstyles are different from operator roles in that an operator role is defined not by their speed, but by their gadget. An example would be Jaeger. He is 3 speed and therefore often is played as a roamer, but his gadget potentially denies attacking grenades and some other projectiles from the attacking team, therefore his role is Anti-Gadget. He provides the defending team with a specific type of utility that gives you a reason to pick him if you need Anti-Gadget capability on a roamer, over, say, someone like Vigil, who is also a very good 3-speed roaming operator, who instead only really provides himself with utility with his drone invisibility gadget. So, with the definition of an operator role out of the way, let's cover the roles available on defense. Please bear in mind that some operators can fill multiple roles depending on their gadget. The first role that I would like to cover is Anti-Gadget, which, as already slightly covered, is a role that provides the defenders with defense against the attacker's utility, which often includes grenades, breach charges, drones, etc. That's sort of what utility means. Examples of operators within this role can be seen in Jaeger, who destroys grenades, and Bandit, who can prevent breaching as well as sometimes destroy drones. The next defender role I'd like to cover is Traps, So this is a role that, as the name quite clearly suggests, lets the defender plant traps around the map that, when triggered, cause some form of negative effect for whoever walked into them. This can be seen in Capcan, who traps doorways and windows with explosives that do straight damage, Frost, who traps the floor with an incapacitating leg trap, and others. The next role is Information Gatherers. This role sees a defender use their gadget to provide some form of info to the rest of their team. This can include Valkyrie, probably the easiest example, as she can throw 3 cameras around the map, which can be placed more or less anywhere that her throw can reach, which is obviously very powerful for giving the defenders increased information, as well as potentially Echo, with now his recently buffed 2 yokai drones, as they can roam about the map and become invisible and then provide information very similar to Valkyrie cams can, alongside operators such as Pulse, or even the 2 new operators Maestro and Alibi. The next role I would like to cover in Defenders is Fortifiers. It's a bit of a weird name, but it's the best I could come up with, so let's get straight into it. This really currently only refers to 2 operators in Siege, Castle and Mirror. Both of these operators are unique in that they can provide additional defensive measures to a site that could majorly impact how the attackers have to push it. It was tempting to throw smoke in this role and name it the delaying role, but I figured that delaying is more or less the game plan of most defenders anyway, as if they delay the attacks enough, they win by default, and therefore this role could potentially include anyone if I did call it the delaying role, so here we are, Castle and Mirror, known as Fortifiers, at least in my eyes. Then we've got the tank role. So this is a bit of a MMO kind of class, if you will. This role is quite specific to Rook and Doc, as they both provide a form of extra health to their team and are typically fairly flexible picks due to their great MP5 and ACOG combo. It can even be argued that their gadget in this case is quite a bit less important than their access to the MP5 ACOG combo, as the ACOG simply provides most of their utility as operators, and very often is largely the reason why you would choose to pick them over someone without an ACOG. Say, for example, you've got a site that has a very long angle into where potentially attackers might enter from. In that case, you might want to hang all the way back with the zoom capability of the ACOG to take, maximum advantage of you being a defender on site all the way back there. So with that, we've covered most of the defender roles. Let's move on to the offensive roles, some of which are shared with the defending roles and some of which aren't. So probably the easiest to identify role that most of you will know if you're just beginning is the hard breacher role, as it has probably the biggest impact to a game. This is a role specific to currently Thermite and Hibana. And essentially what it is the ability to breach through reinforced walls alongside reinforced hatches, which other operators just aren't able to do. Given that, as of the time of this recording, there are only 2 hard breachers in Siege currently, you will likely be seeing one of these 2 operators on every offensive round, and if you don't, then probably something is going to go wrong in that round. The ability to open up a site, or indeed reinforced hatches as and when required, is super powerful, as it reshapes the parts of the map that the defenders specifically tried to prevent being reshaped. Therefore, having a hard breacher on your attacking team is always a good idea in order to mess with your opponent's defensive strategy. The next attacking role is soft breaching, which is similar to hard breaching except that operators with this role have a gadget that will enable them to break soft, unreinforced walls, floors, hatches, windows, and sometimes even ceilings above them. Destruction is a very core gameplay aspect of Siege, and quite frankly, if you're not using it, you're giving up a whole bunch of potential new angles onto the site and other key locations around the map that you could otherwise be using to your advantage to get kills and to destroy certain gadgets. Examples of soft breachers include Sledge, who can slap the environment with his sledge hammer, Ash, who can use her breaching rounds to blow open soft targets from a safer distance, and Buck, whose shotgun attachment can be used to break open floors, walls, and of course his specialty, which is ceilings, something which Sledge, his gadget being a melee weapon specifically, he can't really hit a ceiling. Moving on, we've got Anti-Gadget, which is more or less identical to the defensive version of the role of the same name. Operators in this category have the objective of taking out defending gadgets and defending utility. Obvious examples can include Twitch and Thatcher, whose gadgets specifically eliminate electronic devices. However, it is worth noting that this role can also potentially encompass operators like Fuse, whose cluster grenades are fantastic for clearing an area of traps, barbed wire, and other potential difficulties for your attacking team. The next role I'd like to cover on offense is Information Gatherers / Anti-Roamers. So this is a role that encompasses information gathering, and as a result of the information often gathered, this also serves the dual purpose of being anti-roam. This is due to how, if you know where a roamer is, their power as a roamer rapidly diminishes, as they can't surprise you and get a cheap, easy kill by flanking. This can include operators like IQ, whose scanner shows gadgets, and also occasionally roamer movement, such as Vigil or Pulse, through their gadget use, as their gadgets do reveal themselves to her scanner. In addition to operators like Jackal, Lion, and Dokkaebi. In this category, I would also maybe lump in the shield operators Montagna and Blitz, as once they enter the building, roamers often can have trouble dealing with them, and so they both reveal roamer movement in this sense, in addition to gathering information by staying alive longer than the defenders want them to. In this sense, they're kind of like a heavily armored drone. And lastly, we have the role of Utility. Now, this is a role that includes operators that bring extra utility to a team beyond what normal secondary gadgets can bring, such as Capitao, Ying, and Sophia. Capitao brings essentially 2 extra smoke grenades and 2 asphyxiation grenades, which I guess you could describe as pseudo frag grenades-ish, which also have the benefit, it is worth pointing out, of being un-Jaegerable. Ying brings 3 super flashbangs, if you want to call them that, with her Candelas, and Sophia brings concussion effects in addition to her impact grenades as an extra source of soft destruction. It's very important for a team to have a range of operator roles covered by their operator picks, as having a range will ensure that your team will be decently well equipped to deal with a range of operators and strategies from the opposing team. If, for example, the defenders have a very roam-heavy setup, the attackers will likely struggle if they didn't bring an anti-roam operator. Equally, to re-include playstyles into the discussion, going heavy on a single playstyle, such as heavy roam, will also cause problems in that if the attackers realize what they're facing, they can definitely just opt to rush into the site and overwhelm the poor sod left there to anchor by themselves, something which I think most people end up in the position of once or twice if you play enough Siege. Therefore, unless a specific strategy is being used, say you're in a communicating squad, often it's simply best to have most of the bases covered when it comes to operator roles, as that way you have a chance against everything, although, of course, this being an FPS, it is worth noting that skill can sometimes win back around nearly lost due to a beginning terrible team composition. I will reiterate that it is entirely possible for operators to function in multiple roles. For example, Legion can be seen as both a trap and information gathering operator, as he can see where his traps are being triggered and pass on that information to his team. He's quite unique in that sense, that his traps provide information as well as their beneficial upside. Also, for the sake of clarity, not every operator was mentioned simply to save time and make this less of an essay than it already was. With that said, I do believe that we've covered most of what I wanted to cover in this initial beginner basics video. We've covered different playstyles, different operator roles, and why you want to have a range of roles filled within a team. If you are wanting information on operator synergies, then do stay tuned, as that will also be covered in a later video in this series. Coming up next though, I will be covering breaching and reinforcing, and considerations that you should have when approaching both. Feel free to leave a like or even sub if you enjoyed the video, and if you do, don't forget to hit that notification bell to get notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next Beginner Basics.
Whoa.